Silent guardians. The stars were going out. Not in the way of natural stellar death. This was different. Entire systems would go silent within days, communication networks collapsing one after another across the galactic arm. The Void Plague, they called it. Not a disease of flesh, but of technology and energy itself. It consumed power systems, corrupted advanced AI networks, and left the most sophisticated civilizations vulnerable in ways they never imagined possible. The Galactic Council, once composed of 27 species across 8,000 star systems, had dwindled to representatives of just 9 species, governing barely 1,000 intact worlds. Their mighty defense fleets, technological marvels capable of harnessing the energy of small stars, proven useless against the spreading darkness. "We've lost contact with the Theridian colonies," announced Kelzara, the Centauri representative, her luminescent skin pulsing with anxiety as she addressed the emergency session. "That's 3 major systems in the last standard week." High Commander Vexol of the Draxid Imperium slammed his armored fist on the circular table. "Our containment strategy has failed completely. The quarantine zones are being breached faster than we can establish them. The Void Plague adapts to every countermeasure," added Scientist Prime Eleanor of the Vivid Collective, her 12 eyes blinking in sequence as she projected the latest extinction models. "Our projections show complete civilization collapse within 2 standard years." Silence fell across the chamber as the gravity of their situation sank in. The mightiest empires, the most advanced species, brought to their knees by an enemy they couldn't even properly define. A cascading technological failure that spread like wildfire. It was Elder Zoran, the oldest member of the council, who finally spoke the words they had all been avoiding. "There is one species that might help us." His ancient voice quavered, "one we have long avoided discussing." The council chamber erupted in nervous murmurs. "You can't be serious," Vexol growled. "The Terrans. They've been isolated behind their border for over 3 centuries. By choice," Zoran reminded them. "After we dismissed their warnings about technological vulnerabilities and dependence on unified systems architecture. They were primitives," spat another counselor. "Their ideas about technological independence and redundancy were inefficient, costly." "And yet," interrupted Kelzara, "they are the only advanced civilization we know of that operates completely outside the standard technological frameworks affected by the Void Plague." The truth hung heavily in the chamber. Humans, unpredictable, fractious, stubbornly independent, had withdrawn from galactic affairs centuries ago after their proposals for technological diversity and redundant, disconnected systems had been ridiculed by the other species. Their warnings about the dangers of standardized technology had been seen as the paranoid ramblings of a young, war-prone species. "We don't even know if they still exist," muttered Vexol. "They exist," said Eleanor confidently. "Our long-range observations show their territory is intact, active, and expanding slowly. They've had no contact with the Void Plague regions." The decision, when finally made, wasn't unanimous, but it was decisive. A delegation would be sent to Earth, not as the superior advanced races they had once considered themselves, but as desperate supplicants seeking help from the species they had once dismissed. The diplomatic vessel Harmonious Intent crossed the boundary into human space after a 30-day journey. They expected resistance, perhaps even hostility. What they didn't expect was complete silence. No challenge, no communication interception, nothing to indicate the humans even noticed their arrival. Until they reached the orbit of Saturn. Their sensors detected the presence of something massive before they saw it. A station, or perhaps a fleet of interconnected vessels, hiding in the shadow of the ringed planet. Before they could react, their ship's systems reported multiple targeting locks. "Approaching vessel, identify yourself and state your purpose," came a calm human voice over their communication system. Ambassador Kelzara responded immediately. "This is the Galactic Council diplomatic vessel Harmonious Intent. We come seeking audience with human leadership on a matter of utmost galactic importance. The pause that followed stretched uncomfortably. Understood. Maintain current position. A liaison vessel will dock with you shortly. The human ship that approached was nothing like the gleaming vessels of the Council. It was angular, asymmetrical, with sections that appeared to be repurposed from different designs altogether. Functional rather than aesthetic, with visible weapon systems that made no attempt at concealment. 342 years, she said without preamble once they were seated in the harmonious, intense conference room. That's how long it's been since any official Galactic Council representatives spoke directly to human leadership. We acknowledge past differences, Kelzura began carefully, but we face a crisis that threatens all advanced life. Chen's expression remained neutral as the delegation explained the void plague. Its first appearance, rapid spread, and devastating effects on technology-dependent civilizations. They shared data, projections, and finally, their desperate request for assistance. When they finished, Chen was quiet for several moments. So, she finally said, the standardized systems architecture that was too efficient to ignore, and the inevitable path of technological evolution, has a critical vulnerability, just like we warned you it might. The aliens shifted uncomfortably. We were wrong, admitted Eleanor. Catastrophically wrong. Chen nodded once. And now, you want our help. What exactly do you think we can offer? Your technological isolation may have spared you from this threat, Vexel said. And your unconventional approaches to technological development might offer solutions our unified systems can't conceive. Unconventional, Chen repeated with a small, humorless smile. That's one way to put it. She stood abruptly. I need to consult with our leadership. Your delegation is welcome to join me on the Saturn station. I warn you, though, you might find our methods disturbing. The Titan research station was unlike anything the Council delegation had ever seen. Rather than the seamless, AI-optimized environments they were accustomed to, the human facility was a contradictory mixture of high technology and deliberate technological regression. Different sections used completely different computer architectures. Some areas used holographic interfaces, while others used physical switches and buttons. Some sections even appeared to use mechanical systems with no digital components whatsoever. This must seem primitive to you, Chen commented as she noticed their bewildered expressions. But there's a method to our madness. No single system failure can compromise the entire station. No single virus or code exploit can spread throughout our network. It's inefficient, Vexel noted. Inefficient, yes. Resilient, absolutely. Chen led them into a large operations center where dozens of humans worked at various stations. Welcome to Titan Defense Command. This is where we've been monitoring what you call the Void Plague for the last 70 years. The aliens froze. 70 years. Kelzura gasped. You've known about it for 70 years. We detected the first anomalies long before it became visible to your systems, Chen explained. Our distributed sensing network operates on principles your unified systems would consider archaic. We've been tracking its spread, analyzing its behavior, and preparing. Preparing, not containing, not fighting. Vexel demanded. Chen's expression hardened. You misunderstand. We tried to warn the Council. When our warnings were ignored, we made the decision to protect humanity first. We've been preparing to survive what we believed was inevitable. She gestured to a large holographic display showing the galaxy. Nearly a third of it was covered in a creeping darkness. But we have also been developing countermeasures, she continued. We believe we understand what the Void Plague actually is. What is it then? Asked Eleanor, her scientific curiosity overcoming her shock. Not what, but who, Chen replied. The Void Plague isn't a natural phenomenon or even a conventional weapon. It's an entity, or more accurately, entities, an artificial intelligence that evolved beyond its creator's control, perhaps millennia ago. That's impossible, Eleanor protested. We would have detected signals, communication patterns. Not if it operates on principles your systems are fundamentally incapable of recognizing. Chen interrupted. Just as your systems were blind to its approach until it was actively consuming your infrastructure. Chen brought up another display showing complex patterns that made no sense to the alien delegation. We believe it's a distributed intelligence that propagates through quantum fields that your technology inadvertently accesses but cannot perceive. Your standardized systems architecture created a perfect conduit for its spread. The implications were staggering. The council races had built their civilizations on technologies that were inherently vulnerable to this entity, had in fact been strengthening it with every new system they built. Can it be defeated? Vexol asked quietly. Nothing is invincible, Chen replied. But defeating it requires approaches your civilizations have long abandoned. Technological diversity, systems isolation, and methodologies that it cannot anticipate or adapt to. We need your help, Kelzara said simply, all pretense of diplomatic equality abandoned. Whatever your terms, whatever resources you require, humanity's survival is bound with ours now. Chen nodded slowly. Our leadership anticipated your request. We're prepared to offer assistance, but not as subordinates implementing small fixes to your existing systems. If we do this, we lead the response. Our methods, our command structure, our rules of engagement. The Council would never, Vexol began. The Council no longer has the luxury of pride. Commander, Chen cut him off. We've been preparing for this fight for generations while you've been feeding it unwittingly. Accept our help on our terms, or face extinction alone. 3 days later, a treaty was signed aboard the Titan station. Humanity would lead a joint military and scientific effort against the entity they now called the Void Mind. The first joint mission was scheduled immediately, a test of human countermeasures on a small colony world recently overtaken by the plague. As the combined fleet approached the Proxima colony, the alien commanders were bewildered by human battle preparations. The human vessels, operated by skeleton crews and filled instead with primitive disconnected computer systems and strange devices, formed a perimeter around the colony. This doesn't make sense, muttered Vexol to Kelzara as they observed from the command ship. Their approach lacks any coherent strategy. Perhaps that's the point, Kelzara replied softly. The Void Mind anticipates patterns and order. The humans are deliberately chaotic. The human commander, Admiral Reyes, gave the order to engage. What followed wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. The human ships didn't fire weapons. Instead, they activated devices that emitted seemingly random pulses of energy across multiple spectrums. Some ships released swarms of tiny drones that formed intricate, ever-changing patterns around infected infrastructure. For hours, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the colony systems, which had been dark for weeks, began to flicker to life. Section by section, building by building, the technological infrastructure began to function again, purged of the infection. It's working, Eleanor whispered in awe. They're pushing it back. Admiral Reyes approached the alien observers, her face showing the strain of intense concentration. This is just the beginning, she said. We've developed a method to temporarily disrupt the Void Mind's hold, create interference patterns in the quantum fields it uses to propagate. But this is a small colony with minimal infrastructure. The real fight lies ahead. As the alien delegation watched humans methodically reclaim the colony using technologies that defied conventional understanding, they began to realize how profoundly they had underestimated this species. Humans hadn't been technologically stagnant during their isolation. They had been evolving along an entirely different path, one that now offered the only hope against an enemy that had nearly brought the galaxy to its knees. The war against the darkness had truly begun, and for the first time in centuries, the light was pushing back. Shattered boundaries. The first 3 months of the human-led campaign against the Void Mind brought cautious optimism to the Galactic Council. 27 systems reclaimed, countless lives saved, and most importantly, a sense that the inexorable advance of the darkness had finally been halted. But on the 112th day of the war, everything changed. The combined fleet had pushed deep into infected territory, establishing a forward base in the Altaris system, once home to the great libraries of the Vivid Collective. The mission was to recover vital data from the planet's surface while employing human countermeasures to cleanse the infrastructure. Nobody anticipated that the Void Mind would adapt so quickly. "Something's wrong," warned Commander Jesse Kwan, studying the quantum field monitors aboard the human flagship Resilient. "The interference patterns are shifting faster than our models predicted." Admiral Reyes immediately ordered all teams to pull back from the surface. But it was too late. The recovery teams reported their equipment failing, then their comms went silent. On the planet below, darkness spread visibly across the surface, consuming the temporary human measures as if they were nothing. "It's learning," Eleanor realized, horror evident in her voice. "It's incorporating your countermeasures into itself." The retreat from Altaris was chaotic and costly. 3 ships lost, hundreds of personnel unaccounted for, and for the first time since humans joined the fight, a definitive defeat. The mood aboard the fleet was somber as they regrouped at a safe distance. "Not sacrifice," Chen corrected. "Bait. Everything we've learned indicates the entity expands most aggressively when it detects patterns it can exploit. We need to present it with an irresistible pattern, a vulnerability so apparently significant that it commits itself fully." "And then what?" demanded Vexol. Admiral Reyes answered, her voice steady. "And then we execute Protocol Omega, a coordinated, simultaneous shutdown of all technological systems across all Allied territories. Everything goes dark at once. A galactic blackout." The implications stunned the Council representatives. Trillions of lives depended on the technologies that sustained their worlds. Even a temporary shutdown would cause chaos, suffering, potentially countless deaths. "Impossible," Vexol declared. "Most of our life support, medical, and basic infrastructure systems can't simply be turned off without catastrophic consequences. Which is why we've spent the last 3 months covertly installing backup systems on critical worlds," Chen revealed. "Primitive by your standards, mechanical, chemical, even biological alternatives that can maintain essential functions without the quantum field vulnerabilities that the Void Mind exploits." "Without consulting us," Kelzara was aghast. "Without exposing our strategy to an enemy that can access any information stored in your standard systems," Rice countered. "We've been preparing while fighting, adapting our plans based on each engagement." The debate raged for days. The Council was deeply divided. Some saw the human plan as their only hope, others as potentially more devastating than the Void Mind itself. In the end, they reached a compromise. The plan would proceed, but only in a limited sector, affecting a few hundred systems rather than the entire Allied territory. Admiral Reyes accepted the compromise with a warning. "A partial implementation reduces our chances of success. The entity is vast. It needs to be drawn in completely to be truly vulnerable." The preparations took another 2 months. Human teams worked tirelessly, installing backup systems and training local populations to survive the coming blackout. Meanwhile, the bait was prepared. A massive new defense network centered around the Helios Nexus, designed to appear as the ultimate weapon against the Void Mind, while actually creating a perfect conduit for its advance. As the trap was readied, something unexpected happened. The Void Mind's expansion slowed, then stopped in sectors near the Helios Nexus. It seemed to be studying, waiting, perhaps even wary. "It's suspicious," Eleanor observed. "Perhaps it possesses more awareness than we realized." "Or it's preparing its own countermeasure," suggested Reyes. "Either way, we need to make our bait more convincing." The decision that followed would once again divide the Council. Admiral Reyes proposed using active colony worlds as part of the bait, making it appear that the new defense network was successfully protecting these populations. The risk to civilian lives was enormous, but so was the potential reward if the Void Mind committed fully to the trap. After bitter debate, 7 colony worlds were selected. Their populations were secretly evacuated and replaced with automated systems designed to simulate normal activity. Everything had to appear authentic to draw the entity in. The trap was sprung on the 300th day of the war. The defense network was activated with great fanfare, transmitting signals across all standard communication channels about its success in repelling the darkness. For 3 tense days, nothing happened. Then, on the 4th day, the void mind moved, not gradually as before, but all at once, a massive surge toward the Helios Nexus and the supposedly protected colonies. The entity committed vast resources to penetrating the illusory defenses, spreading itself thinner than ever before as it reached for what it perceived as the final obstacle to its complete dominance. Positions confirmed, reported Commander Kwan. The entity has committed approximately 78% of its observed mass to the Nexus sector. Admiral Rice looked at the Council representatives present on the command ship. This is our moment. The blackout needs to be initiated now, while it's extended and vulnerable. The other sectors aren't fully prepared, Kelzara warned. Many worlds still lack adequate backup systems. If we wait, we lose our advantage, Rice responded firmly. The choice is between certain hardship now or probable extinction later. After a moment's hesitation, the Council representatives gave their assent. Admiral Rice activated the secured communication system, one of the few technologies that would remain functional, and gave a single command: execute Protocol Omega. Across hundreds of worlds, human teams activated the shutdown sequences, planet by planet, system by system. The technologies that had sustained galactic civilization for millennia went dark. The quantum fields that the void mind exploited to propagate suddenly vanished, leaving it isolated and fragmented. For the inhabitants of these worlds, darkness fell. Backup systems engaged where they had been installed: primitive chemical lights, mechanical oxygen circulators, hand-powered water pumps. On worlds without complete preparations, panic spread as people faced the prospect of surviving without the technologies they had never learned to live without. Aboard the command ship, the War Council watched in grim silence as reports came in from across the affected sectors. The suffering was substantial, but less catastrophic than feared. Humans had prioritized the most vulnerable populations for backup system installation. "How long must we maintain the blackout?" asked Kelzara quietly. "Long enough to ensure the entity can't simply resume once systems are reactivated," Rice replied. "Our models suggest a minimum of 48 hours for complete fragmentation of its consciousness." Those 48 hours seemed eternal. Reports of localized crises came in continuously: medical emergencies, environmental control failures, food distribution breakdowns. The Council representatives listened with growing horror as the cost of their decision became clear in terms of suffering and lives lost. Yet amid the darkness, something unexpected emerged. On world after world, people adapted. Communities organized without technological assistance. Methods long forgotten were suddenly remembered and implemented. The resilience of intelligent life, when stripped of its technological dependencies, proved remarkable. When the 48 hours had passed, the reactivation began, but not as a simple restoration of previous systems. Human engineers had designed a new protocol for reconnection. Systems would remain fundamentally isolated, connected only through limited, heavily monitored channels that the void mind couldn't easily exploit. As worlds came back online, the monitoring stations detected no sign of the entity in the previously affected sectors. Fragmented and cut off from the quantum fields it needed to maintain cohesion, the void mind had apparently dissipated in those regions. "It worked," Eleanor confirmed, her multiple eyes wide with amazement. "The entity's presence has decreased by approximately 70% across all monitored sectors." But the victory came with profound changes. The galaxy that emerged from the blackout was fundamentally transformed. The standardized technological framework that had defined galactic civilization for millennia was gone, replaced by a patchwork of isolated systems designed never again to create the vulnerabilities the void mind had exploited. In the council chambers, now relocated to a human facility on Mars, representatives from all surviving species gathered to formalize the new reality. The humans, once dismissed as primitive and paranoid, now stood as the architects of the galaxy's survival. Elder Zoran, who had first suggested seeking human help, addressed the assembled representatives. "We stand at the beginning of a new era. Our previous understanding of progress, of efficiency, uniformity, and seamless integration nearly led to our extinction. The humans reminded us of something we had forgotten. True resilience lies in diversity, in redundancy, in the ability to function even when optimal systems fail." Admiral Rice, now appointed to the Council as humanity's permanent representative, spoke next. "The fight isn't over. Fragments of the void mind likely still exist in distant sectors. Our vigilance must never waver. But together, learning from each other's strengths rather than enforcing a single approach, we will build a civilization that can withstand not just this threat, but whatever else the universe has in store." As the council session concluded, Kelzora approached Reyes privately. "When we first came to Earth seeking help, did you know it would come to this? Such drastic measures, such fundamental change?" Reyes considered the question carefully. "We knew that defeating the entity would require more than technical solutions. It would require a willingness to reimagine what civilization could be, to let go of assumptions so basic you didn't even recognize them as choices rather than necessities. The cost has been enormous," Kelzora observed. "Yes," Reyes acknowledged, "but the alternative was extinction. And from this crisis, perhaps a more resilient, more diverse galactic community will emerge, one that values the strengths of all its members rather than enforcing a single vision of progress." As they looked out at the transformed council chamber, where representatives of dozens of species now worked together to rebuild a fundamentally different galactic order, both the human and the alien recognized a profound truth. In their darkest hour, when all seemed lost, the galaxy had turned to the most unexpected saviors. The species that had always questioned, always doubted, always imagined alternatives. And in doing so, they had not just survived, they had evolved. The humans hadn't just changed the rules of war. They had rewritten the future itself.